Okay, thank you for the reminder. I do appreciate it. Now we are recording class. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Daniel. So, as I was saying, that is very important to remember that aspiration is plosive. It's a puff of air. And when we think about aspiration, we need to think about voiceless plosives. Okay, specifically p, t, and k, which are plosive and which are voiceless. Okay, so only in initial position there is aspiration. In middle and final position, there is not aspiration. These sounds, these voices, plosives are not aspirated. Okay, in a nutshell. Now, fricative sounds. Always think about friction, friction when we think about fricatives, because the friction is created somewhere in the oral cavity, usually by the tongue. It could be the tip of the tongue, the front part of the tongue, the back of the tongue being pressed against an area of the roof of the mouth. Okay, sometimes is the tip of the tongue in between the teeth, the tip of the tongue, uh, or when we say f and v, it's not the tongue, but the upper teeth and the bottom lips, right? So this constriction, right? This restriction of the space, right? Creates this condition in which the air flow leaves the oral cavity, but through a very narrow gap. When we say f and v is basically the teeth, right, which are obstructing somehow the airflow. When we say in the second pair, we say th as in thanks and th as in they, is the tip of the tongue being inserted in the teeth, that is leaving this small or narrow room for the airflow to leave. S and z, s and z. It's a very interesting pair, because you raise the tip of the tongue and the airflow leaves over the tip of the tongue. So it's not actually, when you say s and z, it's not actually touching, but is the tip of the tongue being raised towards the alveolar ridge, but leaving some sort of space, so there is some sort of vibration of the tip of the tongue if you feel it, at least in my case, right? In the next couple, we have sh and j, if you remember, right, from the previous session before the break. So the front part of the tongue is raised, right, and it's in the palate area in which the friction is created, and in the velum or soft palate, and in the glottis area in which a friction is created. So there's always friction being created in an area of the oral cavity, right? So the airflow is not completely obstructed, right? That's why in terms of phonetic classes, fricatives are part of the phonetic class called continuants. Okay, continuants are those consonant sounds in which, even though the airflow is affected somehow, the airflow continuously leaves the oral cavity. As in the case of stops, the other phonetic class, the airflow is, well, as you can read, is self-explanatory. The airflow is stopped somehow, at least for a brief moment, at least for, as it says here, a fraction of a second. Okay, so fricatives are part of this big family called continuants. Okay, other continuants are the affricates. And then I'm going to ask Karen Rojas. Are you here, Karen? Knock, knock, knock.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. Karen, can you take care of this slide, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Africatis, Africatis G produced by a stop closure that is released with a lot of friction. Liquid R produced by causing some obstruction of the airstream in the mouth, but not enough to cause any real friction. Gladys G, and I don't know, produced with very little obstruction of the airstream and are always followed by a vowel.
Thank you so much, Karen, for your kindness. So we have affricates, right? Affricates, which are just two, ch and g, a combination of, it's like taking a plosive and then a fricative, and you combine them and you create an affricate. Because you start with a stop, right, or a plosive, in which you stop the airflow and then you release the airflow as when you are doing with a fricative, right? So you start like t, and then you go with sh. So you say ch, ch. It happens in a very brief, very brief moment, but it's just like combining a plosive and a fricative, okay? And you get the affricate, d and j. So you get j, 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 okay? So it's a closure followed by a release of air. And the next one read by Karen was liquids, ul and and according to some authors, remember that you can always be, you can always agree or disagree, right? Which is really good because human beings can learn to comprehend and then say, yeah, I understand, but I don't agree. um, Liquids, oil and earth, are called liquids because since there's not enough friction, they are not considered to be fricatives, right? When you say you put the tip of the tongue towards the alveolar ridge, and then the airflow goes through the sides, right? It's like placing your hand in front of you, and somehow the airflow would go through the sides of your hand. Well, the same happens, but with the tongue, through the sides of the tongue. And so there's not enough friction to consider a fricative. So it's called a liquid. The same thing with in which the tip of the tongue it's curled back, right? So the airflow goes through on top of the tongue and through the sides. So that's why they are not called liquids. Basically, there's not enough friction to call them fricatives, right? If you consider, for example, zzz, there is very little room for the air stream to leave the oral cavity, so there is friction. Not the case of ul and And the last one read by Karen was glides, right? And the first one, you can think about you or yes, right? The initial sound of these two words, you and yes, can be described with this phonemic symbol, right? In which the back, if you imagine that my hand is a tongue, being this the tip and this is the back. The back of the tongue is raised towards the villain when you say yes, 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 right? So if you remember the vowel sounds which might sound similar, we have the long tense e, and we have the short legs I, as in she, no, sorry, as in beach and bitch, right? Or deem and dim. Okay, but when we produce this, if you remember the vowel, Daniel Jones vowel quadrilateral, they are positioned in a very high front position, right? very high and front, particularly this one. It's very high and front. So the tip of the tongue, when you produce E and I, is right here. But when you produce this semi-vowel, right, E, the back of the tongue is raised. So it's not similar to E and I. Okay? And in the case of this wu, as in where, what, right? When, um, it's a bilabial sound, right? And there's very little obstruction, almost none, right? No obstruction. The particular thing about these two semi-vowels or glides, remember that they are called semi-vowel or semi-vowels, right? Because they sound like vowels, right? But they're not, because there's some sort of obstruction of the airflow, whereas there's no obstruction when we're producing vowel sounds. The particularity is that they are always followed by a vowel. For example, by a vowel. For example, you is followed by you, and yes is followed by e, right? Your is followed by o, right? And when you say when, it's followed by e, or what is followed by o, right? So they are always followed by a vowel, these glides. And a big category is the approximants, in which we include the glides, which is the first pair, right? And the liquids. So glides and liquids are part of this larger category, which is the one called approximants, right? Approximants. And the idea of approximants is that these are sounds which are part of the consonant sounds in which there is not enough friction to be called them fricatives, right? Thais, are you there? Thais, can you take care of this slide, please? Toc, 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 toc. Knock, knock, knock. Thais Ortiz. I bet you thought the teacher was going to keep reading over and over. Luciano Cabrera Reyes, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Luciano, can you take care of the slide, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Approximants. V, G, R, O. Sometimes liquids and lights are put together into one category because the articulators approximate a frictional closeness, but do not actually cause friction. Trills and flaps. What does it mean with the asterisk? Yeah, I mean, one was rapid, right?
Exactly. The one we have in Spanish would be the first one.
Okay. R and R.
Okay.
Trills are produced by rapidly vibrating an articulator. Flaps are produced by a flick of the tongue against the alveolar ridge.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much, Luciano.
No problem.
So the question that Luciano was asking is about these two symbols. Well, the first one is the Spanish we have the Spanish trill, right? When we say ratón, río, risa, rubio, right? R would be the trill. So difficult for speakers of other languages. And we have, I mean, the trill is quite difficult for English speakers and almost impossible for some Asian speakers. speakers, right? Some Japanese or Chinese speakers. And the second one is the flap, which is a flick, which is a very rapid vibration. That is a flick, very rapid vibration of the tongue against the alveolar ridge. When you think about a flap, think about the word, for example, letter. Letter. The consonant that is right there in the middle would be represented by, I mean, the sound in letter could be represented by the symbol, which is called flap, okay? A letter, rider. I'm sure you can think about other words. So this is a very common sound in General American. This is an allophone of the phoneme T, right? So letter can be also pronounced letter. We can use flap, or we can use this allophone, which is usually found in General American pronunciation. Okay. Okay, I'm going to, no, I'm going to, I already did. This presentation was uploaded in the LMS. It contains some information which is known by you, all right? It contains what we call place of articulation and what we call manner of articulation. The good thing about this chart is that it contains these symbols, minus V and plus V, which is voiceless and voiced, okay? So the sound on the left is going to be voiceless. The sound on the right is going to be voiced, okay? The same thing in the second column and all of them, right? I'm just taking these two as examples. Is labiodental, fricative, and voiceless, right? And it's also labiodental, it's also a fricative, but is voiced. Okay? So I think this is a useful chart for you to study and to do the following exercise. First of all, before going into the instructions for the exercise, do you have any comments or questions?
I don't.
All right, all right. So we went through a very brief review about between last session, yesterday, and today, about specifically the description or classification of consonant sounds in terms of place of articulation, manner of articulation, and voicing. So this is a practical task. So what I want you to do is I want you to select a resource. This resource can be, are you taking notes? Yes? So I want you to select a resource that it can be a movie. It could be a movie. It could be. Let me end this presentation because it's taking my concentration away. Okay, so this could be a movie. It could be movie. It could be an interview. Okay, interview. It could be a speech. It could be a TED talk. It could be anything that you have access to in any website, or let's say, for example, YouTube. Okay, and anything that that you can listen to, basically. Okay, so I want you to listen to the first 30 seconds. Okay, so the what? A movie, an interview, speech, a TED talk, right, etc. How long? 30 seconds. Okay, and the procedure is you're going to transcribe plain English first. Meaning what I'm doing now, I'm transcribing plain English. I'm not using phonemic symbols. Okay, so you're going to transcribe in plain English the speaker's words. Okay, and then you're going to focus on the consonant sounds. Okay, so you're going to describe the consonant sounds. Sorry, consonant sounds. You know that. Then you need to focus on three aspects or categories, right? Place, manner, and voicing. So you're going to describe these consonant sounds in the speech, the speech sounds, just consonant sounds this time, okay? So for example, let's suppose that in the speech or interview, speech or TED talk, the person says, describe the consonant sounds. So in the case of describe, right, we have the initial D, we have S, which we have K, we have and we have B, okay? Do not repeat the description. Okay, so for instance, if you already described the sound k, right, you're not going to describe it again. Okay? For example, in the case of describe the consonant sounds, in describe, I already described, right? I already mentioned that, you know, let's suppose that we're doing the exercise. That is voiceless, plosive, velar sound. Okay? So I'm not going to repeat the same description when I read the word consonant. Consonant. I already described that consonant sound here in describe. So I'm not going to repeat the same information again. Okay, so do not repeat the same description. There's no point in that. Okay, so far, do you have any questions?
Do we have to send it to your email?
Good question. Very good question. No, we're going to use it here. You are going to present this, right? You are going to play the movie, the 30 seconds, or the interview, or the speech, or the TED talk, whatever you chose, right? You're going to allow us some time to describe the consonant sounds, right? And then you're going to show your original task, your original description of the consonant sounds. Okay, so it's sort of a mini lesson.
Professor,
Mm-hmm.
when you say describe, we have to literally write, for example, that the sound is a plosive one, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and on voice in
Exactly. Exactly. You need to be able to describe consonant sounds, which is something that you are required to do in this course. In this course, you are supposed to be familiar with the description of phonemes. For this exercise, we're focusing on consonant sounds. So yes, you're supposed to be able to say, well, it's a voiceless, a velar, and plosive sound. Because the next semester, right, we're not focusing on segmental information. We're not focusing on individual sounds, but we're focusing on suprasegmental features like intonation, and how we you address sentence stress, for instance, etc., etc. So this is information that you need to well, memorize and apply for this particular course, okay, and specifically for this exercise.
Okie dokie.
Alrighty. So we can arrange an order. We can say first, for example, voiceless or voiced. We can refer to voicing first. Then velar, maybe we can talk about place of articulation. And then we can finish with manner. We can go and follow that order, if you will. Voicing, place, and manner. Okay? Now, at some point during the exercise, because you're going to show and we're going to listen to your movie, to your interview, to your speech. For example, okay, for example, we have Valentina Fuentes. So let's suppose that Valentina Fuentes is going to go next class. Okay, so Valentina Fuentes. Valentina, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Valentina, what do you think you're going to choose? Are you going to choose a section of a movie, or it could be a song as well, but sometimes songs are a little bit more difficult. What are you going to choose? What do you think?
Probably a movie.
Okay, so you're going to choose your 30 seconds, maybe at the beginning, right? Or in the middle, or you're going to choose a specific scene, which is going to be the criterion for you.
I don't know. Something interesting and not no repeat all the time the same words. I think.
Exactly.
Try
There's a
to
movie. Go on, please.
try to find something variety.
Right. Because if you find a scene in which the character is like holding a gun and is moving for about 20 seconds, and then the character says, all right, let's go. And that's the only thing that you're going to find. It's, right? It's not a good choice. Do you agree?
Yes, totally.
Okay. So, this is very important, right? This is very important. What Valentina is saying, the criterion to select the scene in a movie, it has to be a dialogue. It has to be, I mean, I really like suspense, but not for this exercise. Okay, suspense implies waiting too much for action and dialogue to happen. Any other? Valentina, so you're going to transcribe the dialogue in English first, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Respect to the point of describe the consonant sound. If I describe in the first word the letter D, for example, or the sound, in other word, I need to do it again, or
No, you
just
do
one for consonant.
just once, exactly, just once.
Okay.
Exactly, just once. Because if you're able to describe it in the first word, what's the point of describing the same sound in the, I don't know, the fifth word? I don't know if you agree with that.
Yes.
Alrighty. So you're describing the sound only once, so you need to be careful about choosing the section in the movie or in the interview. It has to be something interesting for you, interesting. So look for something that you really care, a topic that is, I don't know, you use a criterion there, useful, useful or just because you are interested in finding more information about that specific topic. Okay, you're showing this to the class next session. You're playing the movie or the TED talk for us. After we listen to this 30 seconds, you show the script. Okay, you can use a Word file or you can do it in as a PowerPoint, and then somehow show us the consonant sounds that you are describing. For example, you can select or highlight the words using a different color, right? Or you can use somehow a way to help us focus our attention. For example, if you're talking about transcribe and you're talking about the final sound, the final consonant sound, be clear that you're saying, okay, now the final consonant sound is B, B, okay? And you give us a visual clue as well, okay? A visual information, visual input, okay? When you are saying the consonant sound, remember you are saying the sound and you're not referring to the letter. So you're not saying B, but B. In the first consonant sound in the word transcribe, you're saying T, T, and not T. Okay? So you're going to describe the consonant sounds, and at some point, I'm going to ask you, so why are you saying that the initial sound in transcribe, the sound T, is voiceless, alveolar, plosive? So I promise I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to ask you like 20 questions. I'm probably going to ask you one question. But you need to be clear about why, for example, T is considered a voiceless alveolar plosive sound. Okay, voiceless because there's no vibration of the vocal folds. Alveolar because the tip of the tongue is raised and it touches the alveolar ridge, and plosive because there's a full block of the airflow, right? And there is a sudden release of the airflow, and it's aspirated because it's a voiceless plosive in initial position. Okay, so you're showing that you know in a specific case. Okay, and then Valentina might ask us, right? Valentina can finish her mini lesson, and she can ask, for example, one of us. Okay, so in the word plane, right here, the word plane. The final consonant, what is it in terms of, is it a plosive sound? Is it an affricate sound? What kind of consonant sound is it? Okay, she might get some feedback from her classmates. At the same time, she is teaching, right? Reinforcing the message. So at the same time, she is going to be practicing some pedagogical skills. Okay, And so probably Valentina, since we're taking Valentina as an example, she's going to take about 5 minutes, or I guess up to 10 minutes. I guess that would be the maximum, right? And then we're going to have another volunteer or another student out of the 12 that today we have. Now, do you have any questions or comments? All of them are welcomed.
I don't.
Me neither.
Nothing to add, I think.
It's pretty clear, Mr.
Alrighty, alrighty. So, Carlos, yeah, you can choose a song as well. Yes, yes, you can choose a song as well. And I really trust your perception and your judgment. Okay, I trust your judgment. I really like music, and I think that all kinds of music is good in general terms. But remember to judge well when you're choosing a section of a song. Okay, but yes, absolutely, songs are welcome for this exercise as well. Alrighty. So I'm going to do the same exercise. Now, we're going to stop the session, so maybe you can take a few minutes to select the material that you're going to be using. In my case, I'm going to choose the TED Talk because I like them. I consider them, they are pretty interesting. So what I do is I go to YouTube, I type TED Talk, and I type a topic. For example, TED Talks, I don't know, bikes. TED Talk bikes. And I may choose one of these. Why do I ride bicycles while all others are driving? Okay, and I select one of these TED Talks. The good thing about TED Talks is that you can get, as I mean, many of the YouTube videos, you can get the closed captions. So closed captions here at the bottom can make your life very easy. Now, subtitles or closed captions are not 100% reliable. Okay, remember that sometimes sometimes you get a 100% accurate transcription. Sometimes it's not 100% accurate. All right, so be careful about that. So if you don't have any questions, we're going to finish the session, and next session, everyone should be ready. Everyone should be ready, and we're going to do this at random. Okay, so each one of you will be assigned a number. I'm going to put the numbers in the in a bag, and I'm going to take the one of the numbers, and that person is going to start. Okay, so it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. And remember, this is just an exercise. It's not graded, and it's the purpose is just to apply all these very dry, boring theoretical concepts into one resource that you might find more interesting, like for example, a song or a movie. Okay, so have a wonderful rest of the day. I'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
All right, see you, Mr.
Bye,
Thank
teacher.
you.
Bye bye.
Have a good
Bye.
week.
Bye.
Thank you. You too.
Bye, teacher.